What if I told you that Medusa wasn't a monster? She was a victim, that Hades wasn't evil. He was the only responsible god. History's greatest villains weren't villains at all. Today, we're flipping the script on 5 mythology villains who were actually the heroes. Buckle up, because number 3 will make you question everything. Let's dive in. For thousands of years, we've been told stories of heroes and villains. The brave Perseus slaying the wicked Medusa, the noble Zeus ruling from Mount Olympus. But what if these stories were written by the winners? What if the so-called villains were victims of the greatest propaganda campaign in human history? Today, we're going beyond the fairy tales. We're looking at the actual ancient sources, the context, and the darker truths that got buried. These 5 characters got a raw deal, and it's time to set the record straight. Let's start with the most tragic story of them all. Number 5, Medusa. You know her as the snake-haired monster whose gaze turned men to stone. But Medusa started as a beautiful young woman, a priestess in Athena's temple. She was devoted, pure, and had taken a sacred vow of celibacy. She wasn't born a monster. She was made into one. According to Ovid's Metamorphoses, Poseidon, god of the sea, assaulted Medusa inside Athena's sacred temple. She didn't invite it. She didn't want it. But Poseidon was a god and she was just a mortal priestess. She had no power to stop him. Now here's where it gets worse. When Athena discovered what happened in her temple, was she angry at Poseidon? No. She blamed Medusa, the victim. Athena cursed her, transforming her beautiful hair into venomous serpents and making her face so hideous that anyone who looked at her would turn to stone. Think about this for a second. Medusa was assaulted by a god, then punished by another god for being assaulted. She was exiled, forced to hide away on a remote island. Every person who came near her either tried to kill her or accidentally looked at her and turned to stone. She lived in complete isolation. And then came Perseus, the so-called hero. He needed a monster's head to prove himself, and Medusa was the target. Armed with gifts from the gods, a reflective shield, winged sandals, an invisibility cap, he hunted down a traumatized victim living in exile. Perseus didn't fight her in honorable combat. He waited until she was sleeping. He crept up on her using his magic items and beheaded her while she was unconscious. Then he used her severed head as a weapon. This is the guy we celebrate as a hero. Let's recap. Medusa was a victim of assault who was then punished for being assaulted, isolated from society, and finally murdered in her sleep by a guy looking for glory. Yet he gets the temples and statues, while she's remembered as the monster. The real monsters, Poseidon and Athena. In recent years, we've started to reclaim Medusa's story. She's become a symbol of survival, of righteous anger, of women protecting themselves. Some scholars argue her ability to turn men to stone was actually a gift protection against future attackers. Either way, she deserved better. The earliest versions of her myth don't even include the assault. That was added later by Roman poet Ovid. This shows how myths evolve, often becoming darker and more victim-blaming over time. The original Medusa might have been a primordial goddess transformed into a cautionary tale. Number 4, Hades. Thanks to Disney and pop culture, we think of Hades as the devil scheming, evil, trying to overthrow the gods. But in actual Greek mythology, Hades was arguably the most responsible and just of all the Olympians. Let me blow your mind. First, let's talk about how Hades got his job. After the 3 brothers Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades defeated the Titans, they drew lots to divide up the cosmos. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the seas, and Hades got the underworld. He didn't choose it. He didn't scheme for it. He got assigned it and he did his job. And boy, did he do his job well. Hades ruled the underworld with fairness and order. He ensured that souls were judged impartially. Good people went to the Elysian fields, bad people went to Tartarus, and everyone else went to the Asphodel meadows. He didn't torture people for fun, he maintained cosmic balance. Now compare him to his brothers. Zeus couldn't keep it in his pants if his life depended on it. He assaulted countless mortal women, often by deception or force. Poseidon threw tantrums that caused earthquakes and tsunamis, killing thousands. Meanwhile, Hades stayed in his lane and did his job. But what about Persephone, you ask? Didn't he kidnap her? Well, that story is more complicated than you think. In many ancient versions, Persephone wasn't kidnapped, she went willingly, or the marriage was arranged by Zeus. She became a powerful queen of the underworld, feared and respected. Persephone had her own cult and worship. She wasn't a damsel in distress. She was the Dread Queen, the Iron Queen. Some versions say she ate the pomegranate seeds on purpose because she wanted to return to the underworld. She wasn't trapped. She chose to be queen of her own dark realm. Hades never tried to overthrow Zeus. He never schemed to escape the underworld. When heroes came begging for exceptions to the rules of death, he usually said no, not out of cruelty, but because someone had to maintain order. Death is supposed to be permanent. That's the rule. Hades enforced it. Get this, in the entire corpus of Greek mythology, Hades has one wife and maybe one or two minor affairs depending on the source. Zeus had literally hundreds of lovers. Who's the villain here? The faithful husband who does his job, or the serial predator who throws lightning bolts when he doesn't get his way? So why do we think Hades is evil? 2 words: Christian reinterpretation. When Christianity spread, European writers conflated Hades with Satan, ruler of the underworld, must be the devil, right? Wrong. Hades was doing a necessary job. Someone has to manage the dead. That doesn't make you evil. Modern pop culture has done Hades dirty. He's the responsible brother who got stuck with the worst job and did it with integrity. No corruption, no tyranny, just steady, reliable governance of the afterlife. If anything, Hades is the unsung hero of Greek mythology. Someone had to be the adult, and it certainly wasn't Zeus. Number 3, Prometheus. Now you might be thinking, wait, isn't Prometheus already considered a hero? Well, yes and no. In the myths, he's punished as a criminal, a thief who defied the gods. But let's look at what he actually did and why Zeus's response was completely unhinged. Prometheus saw that humans were suffering. They had no fire, they were cold, vulnerable, eating raw meat, living in fear. Meanwhile, the gods hoarded fire for themselves on Mount Olympus. Zeus specifically forbade giving fire to humans, because he wanted to keep them weak and dependent on divine mercy. So Prometheus committed the ultimate act of rebellion. He stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. This wasn't just about warmth. Fire represented knowledge, technology, civilization, progress. Prometheus gave humans the tools to become independent, to stop groveling before the gods for every little thing. With fire, humans flourished. They cooked their food and became healthier. They forged tools and weapons. They created art, pottery, metalwork. They lit the darkness and kept predators away. They founded cities and civilizations. Prometheus literally uplifted our entire species. So how did Zeus respond to this act of compassion? Zeus lost his mind. He didn't see Prometheus as a benefactor. He saw him as a traitor who upset the divine order. Zeus wanted humans to remain inferior, dependent, constantly worshipping and begging. Prometheus gave them independence, and Zeus couldn't tolerate that level of defiance. So Zeus devised the most sadistic punishment imaginable. He had Prometheus chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains. Every single day, an eagle would come and eat his liver. Every single night, because Prometheus was immortal, his liver would regenerate. Then the eagle would come back. This went on for thousands of years. Think about the cruelty of this. Eternal torture for the crime of helping humanity. Zeus even sent messengers offering to end the punishment if Prometheus would just apologize and reveal a prophecy Zeus wanted to know. Prometheus refused. He wouldn't give Zeus the satisfaction. He suffered for thousands of years rather than submit. Prometheus became the ultimate symbol of rebellion against unjust authority. He's the patron of science, knowledge, and human advancement. Every time we push the boundaries of knowledge, every time we challenge unjust power, we're channeling Prometheus. He suffered eternally so that humanity could be free. The story paints Prometheus as a criminal and Zeus as the rightful authority. But flip the script. Prometheus is the hero who sacrificed everything to free humanity from ignorance and dependence. Zeus is the tyrant who wanted to keep us weak and groveling. Who's the real villain here? Eventually, Heracles freed Prometheus with Zeus's grudging permission. After thousands of years of torture, Prometheus was finally released. But he never apologized. He never regretted it. And he's been venerated by humans ever since as the titan who loved humanity more than he feared the gods. Today, we call people Promethean when they defy authority to spread knowledge or help others. Whistleblowers, scientists, educators, anyone who faces punishment for doing the right thing. Prometheus wasn't a villain. He was the first revolutionary, and his real crime was choosing humanity over power. Number 2. Loki. Thanks to Marvel, everyone knows Loki as the villain, the god of mischief, the traitor, the bad guy. But Norse mythology's Loki is far more complex and sympathetic than Hollywood would have you believe. In fact, the gods treated him horribly, and he had every reason to turn against them. First, understand that Loki wasn't born a god, he was a Jotun, a frost giant, technically the enemy race. Odin made him his blood brother, but Loki was never fully accepted by the other gods. He was the outsider, the different one, constantly having to prove himself twice as hard for half the recognition. And Loki saved the gods over and over. When Thor lost his hammer, Loki got it back. When the gods needed Asgard's walls built, Loki figured out how. When they needed treasures or solutions to impossible problems, they turned to Loki. He was their problem solver, their fixer, the guy who made things happen. But did they respect him? No, they mocked him, called him a coward because he used cunning instead of brute force. They made him the butt of jokes. They took credit for his ideas. Thor was celebrated for hitting things with a hammer, but Loki, who actually solved problems with intelligence, he was ridiculed. Loki was also gender fluid and gave birth to several children after shape-shifting into a mare and other forms. In a warrior culture obsessed with rigid masculinity, this made him an even bigger target. The gods' homophobia and prejudice shows up constantly in the myths. They use it to demean and insult him. Then there were his children, Fenrir the wolf, Jörmungandr the serpent, and Hel, ruler of the dead. The gods feared them just for being different, for being Loki's children. They didn't wait to see if these kids would be dangerous. They preemptively punished them. This is where things get really dark. The gods tricked Fenrir into magic chains he couldn't break, binding him until Ragnarok. They threw Jörmungandr into the ocean to exile him. They cast Hel into the realm of the dead just for how she looked. Imagine watching your children who did nothing wrong be tortured and exiled because the gods were scared. The final straw came at a feast where Loki had enough. He called out every god for their hypocrisy. Odin's betrayals, Thor's mindless violence, Freya's affairs. He spoke the truths everyone knew but nobody dared say. And the gods, they couldn't handle being held accountable. So they killed one of Loki's sons and used his entrails to bind Loki to a rock. They placed a venomous serpent above him to drip poison onto his face for eternity. His wife Sigyn stays by his side, catching the venom in a bowl, but when she leaves to empty it, the poison burns him and his convulsions cause earthquakes. At Ragnarok, Loki breaks free and leads the forces against the gods. The myths paint this as ultimate villainy, but is it? The gods tortured his children, murdered his son, and bound him to eternal torment for speaking truth. Loki's rebellion isn't villainy. It's justice. It's revolution against oppressors. Let's tally it up. Loki's crimes: playing pranks, being too clever, speaking uncomfortable truths, having the wrong children. The gods' crimes: Torturing children, murder, persecution, eternal punishment for dissent. Who are the real villains in this story? Hint: it's not the guy who got punished for being different. Modern scholars recognize Loki as the eternal scapegoat, the outsider punished for not conforming. He represents everyone who's been othered, who's been punished for their identity, who's been blamed for speaking truth to power. The gods needed a villain, so they made him into one. Loki wasn't born a villain, he was made into one by a society that couldn't accept him. His story isn't about evil, it's about what happens when you push someone too far, when you punish them for being different, when you torture their family. The gods created their own enemy. Loki just gave them what they deserved. Number 1. Morgan le Fay, the ultimate witch. The evil sorceress trying to destroy King Arthur in Camelot. Right. Wrong. Morgan le Fay is perhaps the most misunderstood character in all of mythology. Her vilification tells us everything about how powerful women are turned into monsters by medieval propaganda. In the earliest Arthurian legends, Morgan wasn't a villain at all. She was a powerful healer, a learned woman who studied magic and medicine. She was Arthur's older sister and one of the most skilled magic users in Britain. She literally saves Arthur's life multiple times. So what happened? Medieval Christian monks happened. As they rewrote the Arthurian legends, they couldn't handle a powerful woman who wasn't under male control. Morgan was educated, sexually autonomous, and practiced magic, everything the medieval church feared. So they systematically transformed her from healer to villain. Here's the kicker. Merlin does the exact same things Morgan does: magic, prophecy, manipulation of events, but he's wise and good while she's evil and wicked. The only difference: gender. A man using magic is a wise wizard. A woman using magic is a wicked witch. It's that simple. Let's look at what Morgan actually does. She calls out the hypocrisy of Arthur's court. She reveals Lancelot and Guinevere's affair, which was actually happening and was destroying the kingdom. She points out that Camelot's shining image was built on lies and corruption. For this, she's labeled the villain. Her supposed crimes: trying to protect her son Mordred, refusing to submit to Arthur's authority, using her knowledge and power independently, being sexually autonomous, challenging the patriarchal order. These aren't crimes, they're acts of resistance against a system designed to control women. Even in the versions where she's supposedly evil, Morgan is one of the healers who takes the wounded Arthur to Avalon after his final battle. She tries to save him. The villain spends her power trying to heal the king. Does that sound like a villain to you? Morgan le Fay's story is the story of every powerful woman demonized by history. She was too smart, too ambitious, too sexual, too independent, too powerful. She didn't stay in her place. So the stories transformed her from a healer into a villain, from Arthur's protector into his destroyer. Modern retellings have started reclaiming Morgan le Fay. Writers recognize her as a woman fighting against a suffocating patriarchal system. She's not the villain of the Arthurian legends, she's the truth-teller, the one who refused to play along with Camelot's pretty lies. The real Morgan le Fay was probably never even a real person. She was a Celtic fairy queen absorbed into Arthurian legend. But her vilification is very real. It shows how legends can be weaponized to keep women in their place, to make female power seem evil and dangerous. Think about the real villains of Camelot. Knights who committed violence, betrayed their oaths, had affairs that destroyed the kingdom. But the woman who pointed out these problems, she's the villain. History is written by the winners, and the winners were the patriarchy. Morgan le Fay deserves better. She deserves to be remembered as what she was, a powerful, intelligent woman who refused to be controlled. Not a villain, but a victim of historical propaganda. And maybe, just maybe, the real hero of the story all along. So there you have it, 5 mythology villains who were actually the heroes. Medusa, the victim; Hades, the responsible one; Prometheus, the liberator; Loki, the scapegoat; Morgan le Fay, the truth teller, each one vilified for challenging power, for being different, or for being written about by their enemies. These stories remind us that history is written by the winners and myths are shaped by those in power. Question everything. Whose perspective are you hearing? Who benefits from this narrative? The villains of mythology might just be the heroes we need. If this video made you rethink everything, smash that like button and subscribe for more myth-busting content. Drop a comment telling me which villain your team now. Thanks for watching.